Some of you know me, and I've been in the media a little bit lately. Let me just give you a little bit about my background, so maybe you can put my comments in some sort of context, or at least you'll have a perspective on what I have to say. My family comes from Ballywinna and McCourt, which are two little crossroads in Galway that you could have driven through in the time I've been standing up here. They both came over at 16 years old with everything they owned in a box about this size. They arrived in Boston to signs that said "not wanted, go home." And they had a difficult life so that I could have a relatively easy life, and allowed me to have circumstances which allowed me to have an interesting career, as Tara just said. I started in a very analog job as a contractor. In South Boston 50 years ago, most everybody was either a contractor or a cop. I tried to become a cop and it didn't work, so I was a contractor. Although with the recent untimely death of Whitey Bulger, there's one more job offering in South Boston. But I'm probably too old to start a new career. I invented early in my career a method of building the conduit around the cable, which is a little bit complicated if you're not an engineer, but it basically had the effect of reducing the cost to build telecom systems by 80%. And then I built the first competitive phone company in America, a company called Corporate Communications Network. And then we merged that into another company called MFS, and we created a company called the MFS McCourt. And then we were lucky enough to sell that whole company to MCI WorldCom. At the time, it was the largest telecom deal ever done. And I say that not to brag, just to make it clear that I have telecom experience, because I keep on reading that I don't have any in the paper. I then built every cable system and phone system from Hermosillo to Guadalajara in Mexico, 1,200 miles. Built a cable system in Colombia. In Mexico, there hadn't been competition since the beginning when Telmex was built. So we had to train 2,000 people of how to build that cable system. When I started selling phone service in Mexico, it was a 1-year wait for a phone line. 6 months after I started, it was a 1-week wait. We dropped the cost by 50%. I then moved to London at Merrion Hotel International. We're the largest designer and builder of telecom systems in Europe. I started RCN, the first company to bundle voice, video, and data in one cable. And as Tara mentioned, I also had a TV station in Grenada, and we got into TV productions, and we brought Angelina Jolie to Africa to do a documentary on children in crisis, children refugees, and Michael Douglas. We did one on children soldiers, and then, as Tara mentioned, we did one in Northern Ireland on the Troubles. So I've been in telecom and media for a long time. As you've probably read, I not too long ago bought and recently sold eNet, and all the proceeds from that sale were invested back into Ireland in 2 other tech companies that we started in Ireland. And as you've probably also read, I'm the last man standing in the national broadband. I'd like to think of it as the last man willing to stand in the national broadband. And I'm standing as best I can, considering the circumstances. A couple of points I'd like to make about the book. And if you take nothing else away from tonight, the most important thing to remember about the book is it makes a great Christmas gift. It's a lovely, lovely book. Mothers, fathers, drunk uncle, unemployed sister, buy it for everyone. The second point, which is far less important, that flows throughout the whole book, is this theory I have that the divide between the haves and the have-nots is getting bigger and bigger. And it's been around forever. There's always been those that were luckier than others, and those that had a better shake than others. But the divide is getting bigger, and there's a couple things that are happening now that make it very different. One, technology is allowing those that don't have to know what those that do have, what they have, and how it's different. Second difference is the internet allows those that don't have to communicate among themselves. And when you can communicate in scale, you can organize yourself around a thought or a person or an objective. So if you have a group of people that have been totally disenfranchised and they know it and they can communicate about it themselves, that creates a volatile situation, in my opinion. At the same time, there's a power shift. You know, power in the world has been delivered from the top down, and how power is gained and wielded and shifted and manipulated and shared always came from the top down. And now, for the first time ever, it's coming from the bottom up. And the new holders of power, they know how to manipulate it in such a way that their voices could be heard. So we have three big things that are going on. There's a widening in the gap of those with capital and those without. There's a power shift where power is no longer being wielded from the top down, but from the bottom up. And then the third thing is the unintended consequence of the internet. And if we rewind for a minute, you remember everybody said the internet was going to be like the printing press on steroids. We'd all have access to the same information. We'd all have access to knowledge, and we'd be able to discuss problems and share solutions. So during the Gutenberg Revolution, as you all know, the first book to be published was the Bible. And though a small group of men at that time thought that if they produced the Bible in mass, and we all had a copy, we'd all read it, we'd all agree, we'd all get along. And what happened is, this was in the middle of the 1400s, which was my favorite period in history, and it was a period where there was the most collaboration, the most learning going on in Europe. And what happened is all sorts of books got published, and all sorts of viewpoints went around the world, which was a great thing, but it was an unintended consequence of those few men that thought if everybody had a Bible, we'd all think alike. So we all started thinking different, which is great. Now you fast forward to the internet. The internet was supposed to do what the printing press did, the unintended consequence of the printing press. But instead, two problems happened. Problem number one is that 4 billion people of the 7.5 billion people on the planet have inadequate or no internet access. That's problem number one. Second is that social media allows you to friend people. And algorithms push like-minded content to your friends. They push like-minded restaurants, like-minded clothes to buy, like-minded views, like-minded news. And then the dangerous part is they start pushing like-minded facts. And then we've invented, I know most of you are business graduates, not engineering graduates, but if you're in a business like engineering, you'd assume that everything is fact-driven, right? Because we have this thing now called alternative facts. And we push alternative facts to these silos that are getting deeper and deeper, and these echo chambers that are getting deeper and deeper. And the analog version, for those of you that don't use social media, the analog version of this is an old product called the television. So if you're in America and you didn't have time to read the paper and you get home and you turn the news on, if you want to even have a ghostly outline of what happened during the day, you have to watch both Fox and MSNBC. You have to watch both of them to even have a ghostly idea of what really happened. So in the traditional media is competing for less and less time, because God only gave us all 2 eyes, 2 ears, and 24 hours. And we're spending so much time on social media that the traditional media, which would be TV and radio and newspaper, has less and less eyeballs and less ears, so they have to get more and more extreme. So they have to create more outrage, whether it's there or not, to get viewers. And it used to be that the people in the media industry, when I started in the media industry, you were the adult in the room that was supposed to calm people. You weren't the one that was supposed to be throwing oxygen on the fire at every chance you can get. I call it reductive outrage. I don't think those are two adjectives. I think outrage is a noun, right? So that's a reductive outrage is what I call it, which is basically brings me back to my childhood, where there was 11 of us in the house, when it was just chaos and not fact-driven, and just one catastrophe after another. But if your goal is just to get views, and your goal is just to sell papers, and your goal is just to get likes, there's great feeling of satisfaction and self-righteousness and self-importance with being right all the time. And obviously you're right because you have 1 million followers on Facebook. Obviously you're right because you have 100,000 likes on your comment. And that type of behavior gives the world things like Donald Trump. That type of behavior gives the world things like Brexit, which is costing $500 million a week. You can't find two people that can even explain to you what's going to happen, and it's costing $500 million a week. And that's that fake outrage is lazy. Lazy minds, lazy people, and sometimes lazy reporting. A fair assessment doesn't get you friends on Facebook. A fair assessment doesn't sell very well, but a fair assessment requires the brains and patience of an adult. And another point that's related to this that I make in the book is that incremental change is no longer good enough. From probably the Industrial Revolution, up to Jack Welch's tenure at GE, it was all about incremental change. Another turn of inventory, another 100 basis points of profit, 10 basis points off your debt, and they had little code words for it, Six Sigma, constant improvement, and all that stuff. So those are all the buzzwords. But technology today not only doesn't reward incremental change, it doesn't allow incremental change. Not only does it not reward it, it doesn't even allow it. So if you want to change your life, you want to change your business, you want to change your industry, in today's world, you better dig deep. You better dig deep, and you better be prepared to use the left side of your brain and the right side of your brain, the creative side and the analytical side. In my opinion, you forget your weaknesses and you double down on your strengths. You count to 5 and you jump in because it's moving way, way, way too fast. And the last point that also weaves its way throughout the book is that if you want to do something that's revolutionary in this world, and I don't know why you wouldn't, I don't know why you choose to live an ordinary life when you can choose not to. It's a choice you make, and most people choose to live an ordinary life. And many of them, when they get older, reflect on it and wish that they hadn't. But if you choose to live a more revolutionary life, I can tell you that you can't stand in the present and picture your life going forward and really accomplish anything. You need to put yourself in the future and turn around and look backwards and say, how do I build myself a plan to get where I'm already standing? Because if you don't, if you sit in the present and you look forward, the problems and the roadblocks that you see, you're not going to know whether you want to throw up or cry because they're just too many. But if you put yourself in the future and you're already there, you can visualize how you got there. And then hopefully you won't be afraid to take the plunge. So save yourself the agony. It's a much, much easier way to do it. And the world obviously needs the Smurfit graduates to solve these problems and put their A game on. We have real problems to solve, not manufactured outrage. I know it sells papers, it gets votes, gets likes, doesn't solve any problems. Maybe some of you Smurfit graduates will move to America and solve our gun problem, which we can't solve. Maybe some of you will solve the clean water problem. 800 million people in the world don't have clean water. 5 million people die a year because they don't have clean water. That's 13,000 a day. That's 1,000 in the time we've been drinking vodka and Temple Tree. 1,000 people died because they don't have clean water. In sub-Saharan Africa, 1 in 5 babies don't reach their 5th birthday. So those are real problems that need smart people with revolutionary thoughts. And when I wrote the book, I was not hoping as much business people would read it as I was hoping that people who don't really have a need or utility for money but want to think differently. Because business people, fortunately or unfortunately, they're like mice. They'll find a crumb somewhere. They'll find a piece of cheese and they'll do just fine. But some other people have dedicated their life to teaching or to medicine or to law, and they just, the schools don't usually treat them to entrepreneurial classes in how to think more entrepreneurially. And if you think about how different the world for you young men and women are going to be, in 10 years, 60% of the world's population is going to live in cities. 60% of the world's population is going to be under 18, and 100% of them are going to know how to use technology. And as I said earlier, if you have a bunch of people that are angry, poor, uneducated, pissed off, all living in cities, all under 18, and all able to communicate, that's a volatile world. So those problems need to be solved, and hopefully the Smurfit graduates will ignore some of the callous indifference and cruelty that seems to be in favor around the world right now, and some of this fake outrage, and maybe solve some of those problems. I know I'm standing right behind a statue out there of James Joyce, and I know I'm in the land of literary giants, and my book won't be a classic. But the good news is, any of you that said you have read the classics here are lying, so I have a better and those that have read it don't understand it. So, and my book has pictures for those of you that are slow readers. So I would say that make it a good Christmas. I feel like that old guy in Love Actually that was trying to get his song to become number one. Just do it for me. If it's number one, I'll come back in naked like he did. So I think you should buy the book. And with that, I hope everybody has a Merry Christmas, and thank you very much for listening.